8-uur-journaal op maandag deze keer. We hebben dat een beetje verschoven. Dus nu is maandag de dag dat we updates doen en dat je vragen kan stellen. Natuurlijk hebben we weer Caroline en Martine die mij bijstaan met de vragen. En vandaag hebben we ook weer een gast uit Israël. Het leek ons een goed idee om weer even een update over Israël te geven. Sorin, Schapira, welcome.
Good evening, Willem. How are you? Nice to have you. Nice to be here.
So I think now it is 9 o'clock in Israel, am I correct?
Absolutely.
Good. Are you allowed to go out? Because we hear troubling stories that the lockdown is returning.
Well, at the moment, there are only stories. The only restriction that was reinstalled is the face mask indoors. Outside, you can still go without the face mask, and the issue of traveling through the only gate outside this country, which is the Ben Gurion airport, this is going to be a little tricky because they're trying to restrict the entrance, so-called because of fear of the Delta variant.
The Delta variant, and how far is the Delta variant now? Because in some countries they scream that it is taking over everything. So what is the percentage in Israel?
There's no percentage. They are testing mainly to aim children, and this is the 12 to 15 years old tier. They are trying to vaccinate, and everything is oriented towards this one. And if it, for instance, it was the father of one of the students that came from, I think it was from the Arab Emirates, and he came in, he tested positive. Of course, it's the Delta variant. They started to run testing within the epidemiological study, and it ended up with 140 students being sent to isolation. So this is how it started. Everything aims the children now.
We first heard some. Yeah,
and the numbers are small. The numbers are small, and first of all, there is no uniformity in the information about this variant in Israel. But something that seems to be spreading around as information is that it is indeed somehow more contagious, but clinical less dangerous. So this is the most important thing, is the clinical features, not the PCR test, which has all the flaws we already know about.
Exactly. So Ivar Cummins from Ireland has a nice term for it. Virus variants or political scariants. Well, I think it's clear which one we prefer. Normally, a virus might get more contagious, but as a rule of thumb, they become less lethal, less pathogenic. So that could be the case. However, we see still a decrease in cases in the hospital. So I don't know if that is actually true.
Funny that you mentioned it. Today I was driving to the office, and I heard the head of one of the regional hospitals in the center. He was saying, yes, we know it's more contagious, but it's less significant clinical wise. And then he was asked by the interviewer, do you see more patients in the hospital? And said, no, we are not witnessing an increase in the patients' numbers. And I think this is the answer. It doesn't affect the hospitalization rate of of patients.
Now,
These
of course,
patients are the only sickness these patients exhibit is the sick, the positive test. They themselves, most of them, they display no clinical feature, no complaint.
now, of course, we first heard some encouraging stories that the vaccination passport was not used anymore. Is that also coming back?
Yes, the issue is on the table again. As previously it was said that the mask will come back, and eventually it came back. They are discussing again about the green certificate. Hopefully not. For the first time today, I think I heard a decrease in the confirmed cases. So perhaps there is some process that will eventually attenuate this move. Also, there were all kinds of things. For instance, there was the state of emergency and the special law was prolonged, and we had the professional opinion of the head of the medical services from the Ministry of Health. And as I saw today, she got a legal letter from two lawyers claiming this paper, which was professional opinion, was misleading the government, and they show. So perhaps these letters, which eventually are going to be translated into legal steps, they might prevent from running forward as they would like to. But again, you have to go to appeal to the Supreme Court, and we don't really know. It's like an operating room. You go into it, you don't know how you get out, and it's the same here. And I guess you are the one to know better from your experience.
I mean, we are in court a lot. We see an almost complete breakdown of the legal system if it concerns cases against the state. So where the legal system might still function if you have a case against another person, then the state is not a stakeholder in that case. But there is no separation between the legal body, the judges, and the ministers. That's very clear, and that is very concerning, of course. Now, we also heard some encouraging stories about a change in the political direction, because Netanyahu is not coming back as prime minister.
Yes, but before we go on, I would like to relate to what is said. It is true, the Supreme Court is reluctant to file against the state. But even if a petition is an appeal is filed against a civil servant, still it will be difficult because it's a civil servant, and this might be the gate towards a claim against the state itself. So this, having said that, I will address your last question. Yes, he is out. He's out from the government. He still didn't leave the official residence. He's still there until, I heard, until the July 10th. Well, it's difficult after almost 12 years. It's difficult to leave this residence. But unfortunately, the new figures, both the prime minister and the health minister, they don't show a clear sign of changing the policy. It seems that the powers sensation of power, unlimited power, it's somehow very tempting. And it's appealing whoever comes.
So they are continuing the same line when it comes to COVID or Corona?
For the time being, yes. And even based on so-called health ministry recommendation, they have reinstated the indoor mandate of mask. But for the time being,
Sorin, isn't that amazing? Because before we had the introduction of masks, everybody in Holland, scientists and politicians alike, said they are useless. This is just a behavioral experiment. Then they were mandated. There was a lot of upheaval. Now in Holland, they are taken out again. And everybody said, yeah, but they weren't working anyway, because we know it's an experiment and there's no proof of it. And the problem is with science that if it's true in Holland, then it's also true in Israel. So how can people again take to masks when there is absolutely no scientific evidence for it?
Simple, a good question and a simple answer. Scaremongering.
But it doesn't work.
It is, but it worked psychologically. Some people have been treated with so-called shockwave, and even though it was lifted, the mask, face mask was lifted, first outdoors and then indoors, I could still see individuals using it outdoors, driving in their car alone. So this has nothing to do with science, Willem. You must be aware of it, and I know we've been discussing this before. Science has nothing to do with this. It's pure scaremongering. It's indoctrination. That it is. Science has nothing to do with it.
I even read articles, because I never was into face masks, but then of course this came up and I read articles, but it even shows that for doctors in the operating room, there's no real benefit actually. That's also already a ritual.
I read few articles about this, and they said it doesn't really affect the infection rate of a patient wound, whether the surgeon wears a face mask or not. And some of them even indicated that operating with face masks had a higher percentage of infections. So you see, it could be as well as a false sense of security, and then you just touch with your sterile glove somewhere, and then in the surgical field, it could be. But yes, there are some paradigms that should be reassessed at least.
Then going to the injections. So now I think 60 to 70% of Israel, of the people above 16, have been fully vaccinated. Of course, among the Orthodox Jews, that percentage is much lower. And I believe among the Arabs and even in the occupied territory in Palestine, there's very few that have been vaccinated. So does that bring a polarization? Is there do people who are jabbed see the other as a danger, vice versa?
Well, some of them are yes, some of them are a little bit reserved in those jabbed with reserved vis-a-vis those that they didn't take the vaccine, so-called vaccine. And about the percentage, I think it's most of the adult population it's vaccinated already. Somebody said it is only 500,000 individuals adult individuals that are left not being jabbed. I'm one of them. And the children, it started a few days ago. I heard that there was an increase in the number of children brought to be injected. But the issue about this is interesting, and I will go to the end of your remark in the question. The Palestinian Authority has returned all the vials of a cold vaccine. They returned it because the expiry term is the end of July. And now, having all this stock, they have to use it. And they rush over the children like a storm. Hopefully, parents will be enough aware to be reserved to watch.
And how is that legally? If the parents do not consent, can the child still be jabbed?
No, there was an attempt to make them eligible, eligible to consent the minor, but it didn't go through, and still it's up to the parents. At first, they started to say that one is enough. Probably will still work with the acceptance of one parent, and some of them will require two, at least the objection to this vaccination. But you never know.
Yeah, and do you feel that the injecting of children is a step too far? Because I feel that in Holland, that is really a sensitive subject, and that actually brings much more resistance. We get a lot of media propaganda that children should be vaccinated, but also in Germany, people are not convinced of the need of it.
We in Israel are the chosen people. Okay, so we've been chosen for this experiment, and apparently the children also. And I need to give you a little background. The high schools have finished by June 20. They are on summer vacation. Elementary school, they're still running until another day or two. Now, it was just prior to the summer vacation, and they started to do this vaccination campaign, viewing the parents' desire to go abroad. So they said if they will return, the children will have to be in isolation for 14 days. And if there's isolation, the parents will have to be, but the parents will not be paid if they weren't vaccinated. So it's sort of a coercion. And just because they want to go abroad, some of them are going to take the children to the vaccination centers.
That is coercion. That's actually completely illegal. Do people feel it as such? Is it seen as coercion, or are a lot of people like, okay, if that's what it takes, I need to go on a holiday, so jab them, please?
Question answered. Exactly
this way. It is amazing how great the trust is in these institutions that people surrender their children without even thinking about it.
It's not, I'm not sure it is the trust that plays a role here. It is my feeling that it is the despair from the long period of restrictions and limitations, and so they're willing to do everything. They're willing to do everything just to go on vacation, to a family vacation. Last year, it was almost impossible. This year, it seems to be open.
So people want to go, but on the other hand, these luxuries, we've grown so attached to all the possibilities we have in life. I remember I didn't leave the country until I was 15, and at that time, going to France was even a special thing. And I feel that people are not aware of their options to have a holiday in their own country, because Israel is a beautiful country, so you don't need to go anywhere.
Yes, but it's not the same. It's not the same. You really need to disconnect in order to really enjoy the vacation. It's not the same, unfortunately.
And can people take a cruise, because then you're also out?
Sorry?
Can people take a cruise?
No. The only way to go in and out is the Israeli Ben Gurion airport. This is the only gate, outside, inside.
And that's the way they control. You were one of the first people that brought the ailment or the disease myocarditis to my attention. And that myocarditis, you were absolutely right, has become a big problem. It is admitted now by the CDC in Israel, in the UK. The EMA has admitted it. So it's very clear that that you were right. Of course, these bodies or these institutions are downplaying it. So it's very rare. In Israel, people have been injected a lot. So if you would have to describe the size or the impact of this ailment, does it hit particular groups, and how big is it?
The myocarditis is predominantly affecting young individuals. For the time being, it is 16 on. We didn't hear yet from children less than that, but it might be because some of them were admitted in the hospital, and there is a sort of general denial of any link between the vaccination and possible adverse effects.
So in Israel, there's still a discussion, because other instances have admitted the link now.
There is no discussion about the myocarditis. I'm talking about adverse effect generally, but myocarditis, it has been established that it must be connected to the vaccination, although they limited it to a certain period after the second. So if it is more than that, questions will be asked whether it is really related to the vaccine or not. But anyhow, it is. And I have seen personally a file of a 17 years old youngster, and 19 and 20, and it goes on. And one has to remember that myocarditis is the reason for written arrhythmias, for different arrhythmias. These arrhythmias sometimes may end in a fatal way. And we already had few out of the blue sudden death. This could be also some connections. We don't really know, because in Israel it is not accustomed to do a post-mortem. So this is a difficulty issue even before the corona. And now it is even more difficult to do this.
But isn't there a legal right? So aren't there families who insist on having an autopsy?
most of them, they're not, the issue of autopsy, it's not a habit. The normal way is a deceased is taken to the grave and that's it. No autopsy unless there is a suspicion of criminal act. And then you have to have a permit from the police. But if people, they are found at home with a reasonable background of infectious disease, they will say, okay, it's corona. And if it is a positive test, no question asked. In the hospital, even less than that. But there was one case, I remember I read one case that the family demanded an autopsy, and somehow the authorities went extremely fast and took the body to burial. So it was buried without autopsy in spite of family request for autopsy. Probably they operated alone vis-a-vis the police, and if they employ a lawyer, could be they would have gotten it, but it seems to be they were facing it alone, so no legal advice.
Yeah, what we also hear, also in Holland, but also other countries, is that doctors or hospitals are trying to dissuade or discourage people to take action, not only autopsy, but also report it in the VER system, or in Holland it's LAREP. Do you see that same behavior? So do doctors and hospitals have a tendency to discredit the link between the injections and any ailment?
I haven't seen it personally, but the reports coming from people or relatives of people admitted in the hospitals, they say they are discouraged. At first, the first reaction is, no, it has nothing to do with the vaccine. This is the first, and eventually, when everything is ruled out, this is the only thing left. So this is a type of diagnosis that is done by ruling out.
Mm-hmm. And are there already alternatives? Because if we look at India or other countries, Czech Republic, Slovakia, now they have incorporated, Mexico as well, they have incorporated the use of ivermectin as a prophylactic, but also as an early treatment. And we see the cases going down dramatically. Did Israel also include that tactic, or is it still unknown?
No. Funny that you mentioned it. Earlier today, I had a discussion with the researcher, one Professor Schwartz. I had a discussion with him about his results, which he exposed in his presentation. His research on ivermectin as not as a prophylaxis, but as a treatment in severe cases and less severe. The results were encouraging, but his study was actually terminated at 100 subjects, 100 patients. Although...
You mean limited or terminated?
Limited, but de facto it was terminated because it didn't go any further. And this is the same hospital that ran the remdesivir research. And they were pushing remdesivir. And of course, such results as the ivermectin would have jeopardized the continuation of this research. And you know, the manufacturer of the remdesivir is Gilead, which is a great pharma company. And this drug has a bad history because it failed many times in the past, and now they're trying it again. So it's
repurposing something because it still has a patent. And for the viewers, ivermectin is, I think, rights-free. And that is one of the reasons why it's not an option for the pharmaceutical industry. Are your colleagues aware of what is going on in science, or are they aware of that it's experimental, and are they aware of other treatments like ivermectin?
it has nothing to do with science. Even my colleagues, some of my colleagues, they just take it as it is. In spite of this, they're fed by the information given. So they are literally regurgitating the information they were fed before. Very few are autonomously thinking and reconsidering. And you would see research like, for instance, like remdesivir in the mainstream media, but you will not see the results, even preliminary results of the ivermectin on the mainstream media. These were on the social media. So you can easily understand. And most of my colleagues, they are at such an age, they don't use Facebook, even less Instagram, or they go to the TV and the so-called scientific section in the news. Come on, this is not the real source. And I have to tell you, some of them are really brainwashed. They just refuse to see the situation for what it is. And I tell them, listen, hey, you learned medicine like me. It's the same textbook. Recall the basic science. My theory is that accepting that something is wrong is shattering many years of medical practice and complete distrust in the medical institution. So I think they are more afraid from a major deception, major professional deception, than the truth itself. But unfortunately, they come together. The truth brings deception. So avoiding deception, they have to avoid the truth.
That is a psychological mechanism that happens quite often. Are you able to talk about it, or are they really not interested in anything else? And then a follow-up on that is, if there are so many people injected, then there must be lots of people that need care and help. So do these doctors themselves understand that this is what's happening is not normal? Because these ailments are not, especially when you look at young people, we never had a lot of young people with myocarditis. That just never happens.
As I said, some of them will see the amount of cases piling up, but they will relate it to something else. Those indoctrinated, they will not make the connection in between the two, or they will refuse, maybe subconsciously, to make this connection between the two. There are cases, they are silenced, and it could be somebody is paying for these expenses, because when they get complicated, they go to hospital, and hospital costs money, and patients don't pay it out of their own pocket. It is the insurance company, in which case we have HMO. So it's the HMO that is going to pay this admission and treatment. So it seems illogical that they will have to take on themselves such an expense, such a sum, which one cannot even assess at the present moment, and it could end up to much more, twice, 3 times, even 10 times so far. Seems like there is some kind of remuneration or something like this, but I can't prove it. I have absolute no proof, nothing to base it on.
Clear. So I think Egypt is actually one of the countries, it's a neighboring country, that allows ivermectin. Is there a lot of back and forth between Israel and Egypt, or is that land border shut and you have to go by plane?
Everything is closed. All the borders, all the land borders are closed. The gate, as I mentioned before, only gate is the airport, not even the harbor. The harbor is mainly for commercial ships. There are no more cruises. I think it's starting from March last year, all cruises were stopped.
Okay.
One thing though, it is the only traffic would be in between the Palestinian authorities and Israel, because some of them are coming to work in Israel. But I don't think they can traffic with ivermectin, because they don't have ivermectin also. All the drugs they get it through the airport. So it doesn't seem, I didn't hear about it.
Mm-hmm. How do you see it developing? Are you positive going forward, or do you feel that you're going into a next lockdown and people are not aware of what is really happening?
It's a difficult question, because this is how it started before, with the reports and all kind of things. And eventually it ended up with the lockdown. This time around, seems that people are already fed up, and there are so many individuals vaccinated, so doesn't give any legitimacy for a 4th lockdown. What we are fearing is that individuals that were not vaccinated, like me, for instance, and then other, they will have to suffer some restrictions. At what extent, no one can predict.
So you are expecting a sort of medical apartheid. Do you also expect maybe from the media or from politicians a hate campaign towards those who did not take the jab?
I think it was already done, and the campaign is already carried by part of the population itself. You don't have to have it orchestrated from the government. It is already in the streets, and it's very individual. Some of the vaccinated people, they have taken it because they were coerced at work. They wanted their life back. They hope it was, they were given.
Especially that group must be outraged that they did everything that was asked: wear the face mask, do the testing, take the jab, and they were promised freedom, and now they have to surrender it again. Isn't that group outraged? If we look at the United Kingdom, we see something happening, is that a lot of people lost faith completely, and the crowds are getting bigger and bigger there.
They are outraged, but the outrage is channeled to two different channels. One channel is towards the authorities. Some will turn it against how should I call it? Those people that refuse to get the jab. So some will do it both ways, just out of frustration. They will take it on whoever comes first, and usually is the population. Because individuals meet each other, authorities, it's something vague, amorphic.
Very clear. Okay, then I want to go to Martine and check if there's any questions.
Yes, hello, good evening.
Good evening.
Well, there's this following questions, how the situation is between people who are jabbed or not jabbed. If there's still, people are concerned, can I come close to someone who's jabbed or not? Can they infect me? And how does that work? What's your opinion, Mr. Schapira?
Well, some of them are concerned, but many, I think many started to understand that it is already done. Most of the population is already vaccinated here, adult population. So there is no such a fear. For instance, I went to a restaurant, okay, and hardly saw anyone with the mask indoors. Of course, it's not the customers. Customers cannot have a dinner or meals or anything with the mask, but even the staff, most of them were without mask, or instead of face mask, they will have chin mask, only this.
Okay, well, let me see if there's another question. No, I'm not sure. Willem, do you have any more questions?
Well, what do you, because Israel seems to be like the beta test. Everything that happens in Israel 1 or 2 months later happens in the rest of Europe. So what is your advice and what is your concern? What should we do in mainland Europe to make sure we do not go into lockdown again and we do not get back all those silly restrictions?
I wish I was so smart to be able to give you advice. I will take it myself. And I guess it has to do with the geography. And when I say geography, is actually a cultural differences between nations. Everybody has to be resilient and to resist all these steps, anti-human rights steps. But the one issue that should be addressed, and it's coming again, is the PCR. This is the backbone of this pandemic. This one has to be destroyed, because having this, it will always come back in a form or another form. We have to get rid of it. And one issue I need to tell, I read, I think it was 3 weeks ago, or maybe a month ago, that the CDC recommended for vaccinated people to employ a PCR up to 28 threshold cycles. So if this is a requirement, this is a requirement for everybody. It's not because of the only vaccinated. And you see, again, it has nothing to do with science. It is either you detect virus or you don't detect the virus. It doesn't matter if one is vaccinated or not. The threshold cycle, that's it.
So we had some very interesting news today. I saw some questions in our parliament being answered by our former health minister, where they said, no, we do not use a threshold. We just run 40 to 45 cycles. If it's positive, and then we have to report it. I was amazed. So I directly made an appointment at the police because I have to file charges again. That is so far out of the intended use. That's amazing.
First of all, I don't have to tell you because you know this probably better than me, but the PCR is a manufacturing method, and it is intended to amplify DNA, while this virus is an RNA virus. And that implies reverse translation from RNA to DNA. This is one step, which is a basis for errors. Now, you have to think, by the time the PCR was intended to manufacture mass genetic primers, for instance, this was for just to have it. When you have to use it for detection, for diagnosis, you have to have clinical correlation. This is compulsory. You cannot have a positive individual which displays no signs or symptoms. This is worthless, absolutely worthless. We do use the PCR system, PCR testing, while a person has a clinical condition which requires a differential diagnosis, but you don't really know what it is, and you have a number of possibilities, and then you start by ruling out. You rule out by PCR, by CT, by all medical means available, but it has a medical condition to address. In this case, you take absolutely healthy individuals, make them subject to a stupid test, which is not able to differentiate between dead virus or debris of nucleic acids. Doesn't make sense. And again, science has nothing to do with this. This is a hoax.
I completely agree, and I think we should focus this whole summer on a few items, which is T-cell immunity, ivermectin, the side effects, the injection of children, and of course, the number one, the PCR test.
Take the PCR down, you will be able to get rid of most of them.
That's what we'll do. So let's continue the fight. Thank you very much, Sorin. We will have another meeting tomorrow again. That will not be broadcasted, but we try to keep everybody posted on the medical issues and, of course, the situation in Israel. Thank you again.
Thank you. Good evening.